Hello. This is the fifth lesson in the fifth fetter, and we're going to talk about the verbal indicators. As you probably have found out, when we talk about the bubble of reality, where everything you experience, so everything you say, everything you think other people are saying, everything you perceive as what is happening out there, it's just a reflection of you. That is a very, very uncompromising way to work with your shadow. So it's really, really deep shadow work. It's really very, very uncompromising shadow work because there's nowhere to hide. At least when you work with the Freudian or with the Jungian shadow work, you have somewhere to hide because you have a story, and you can say that the reason why my shadow is as it is because of my upbringing and my parents and all of that, and then you keep it at the story. But when we see through self and we work with the awakening curriculum, and we know in the first fetter that there is no separate self, then there's nowhere to hide. And when you become aware of everything you say and you think other people are saying, it's just about you. That makes everything very, very uncompromising, because you sit, people are saying something, you get thoughts about what they're saying, and immediately you're aware, this is about me. They are not anything, they are not like snobbish or arrogant or stupid or whatever you think. They're not. They're just themselves. Whatever you think about them, that's about you. So they have activated parts of you that makes you feel, if you were acting like that, you would feel stupid or snobbish or arrogant or whatever. And that truly acknowledging that nothing is ever anything external, that is very, very uncompromising. And it's also why we have talked about when we work with the verbal indicators, because the verbal indicators, that's about words. So it's things you're saying, things you're thinking, things you think you hear other people are saying. That is using words that has a very specific flavor or very specific color. When you say things in a certain way that it's blaming. When you say things in a certain way that you're shaming or you're complaining or you're explaining. And now with the bubble of reality, with the knowledge of that, that you're not complaining about Janice. We have been happily saying that everything was about Janice, but now you know that Janice is Janice. It's about you. So you're complaining about Janice's actions. It has nothing to do with Janice. Janice is doing something that activates you. Why does it do that? What is it that she is allowing herself that you're not allowing yourself? What code of conduct is it that she clearly does not, obey, and you do? And therefore you feel resentful about her doing it since you're not allowed to do it. And that is complaining. Complaining is very much about that passive, aggressive, non-expressed anger that is lying, and boiling underneath. And really realizing that all the verbal indicators are just a mirror that is held up against you, so you see all the things about you that you don't like. That is making this very, very hard to deal with. So we have decided to make this part of the lessons of the verbal indicators a little bit different. We have the this lesson now, and then we break them up, the 4 verbal indicators. So the first one will be about blaming. I'm going to talk about blaming, and then we have made an inquiry for you. So when you have issues about blaming, you can listen to the inquiry over and over and over and over, and that will help you. And we're doing that with shaming, complaining, and explaining as well. And in the last lesson in the verbal indicators, it's about all the diversions and all the verbal hoops that we are saying that are very, very clearly directing and pointing in a certain direction. But we're splitting it up so it's more digestible in smaller bites. So it's not like a 3-hour lesson that you have here, but also making the inquiries in a way so you can save them on your phone and listening to them, before you fall asleep, or whenever you need a reminder of the direction that you're in. So when we blame, shame, complain, and explain, it's verbal indicators that are very clearly about you. And what is important to remember is that we do that. We blame, shame, complain, and explain because we are acting as if we are a child that cannot fend for ourselves. It's back to the second Fetter, where we are talking about the toxic starting point of the bully, the passive-aggressive bully, and the chameleon. And if you need to revisit that, I can recommend you to do that while you're working with the verbal indicators here, because they're connected. They're connected. So the blaming and the shaming is the aggressive bully. The complaining and the blaming is the passive-aggressive bully, and explaining and self-blame and self-shame is the chameleon. So I can recommend you to go back to the curriculum in the second Fetter and visit the parts about the toxic starting point, because we are looking into that. And as we talked about about the toxic starting point, we are reacting because there is some part of us in us that has not been met. We had an experience when we were a child and we could not understand. We could not make sense of it. We could not defend ourselves. We could not protect ourselves. We believed what the adults or whatever happened to be true. And that is the part that needs to be met. So when you're working with the verbal indicators, we really, really want you to be compassionate with yourself. Really be filling yourself up with love. And when you are then catching yourself in blaming, shaming, or complaining, breathe. And then just stand for a moment and make contact with your body. Because right now you're diverting from something that is happening in your body. There is a very, very uncomfortable feeling in the body. And that is what you're trying to divert from. And you're diverting with projecting it out there. So it's about Janice. So you're complaining about Janice, you're blaming Janice for something, you're shaming Janice about something. And you do that because the part of you that needed compassion back then, that needed love back then, wasn't met. But you have the chance now. And instead of just staying there and saying that, well, that was my inner child that needed that, there's no point in me doing that right now. The reason why it comes up now is that you have the capacity now. Whatever happened to that child was cruel and it was unfair, and the child could not defend themselves. But you can now. So where you didn't have the bandwidth then to meet yourself with love and compassion, and you should have had parents that met you with love and compassion, they didn't. You should have had some kind of parental guidance in your life. You didn't. But now you do. Now you have become the person that would have been gold for you then. And that is what we're using. This is a little bit apart from the seventh Fetter, where we are looking into that dissolving of time. And what you do is that you see the situation you're in when you're blaming, shaming, complaining about Janice. That right now, I perceive myself as a very fragile child. I'm not. I was. I'm no longer. I don't need to externalize anything. I don't need to project anything. Whatever is happening in here, I can stay with. I have the bandwidth now. I have the compassion and the kindness. I have the a proper solid grounded foundation in me to stay with this now. So now I'm deciding to stay with it. I feel in my body right now that I'm so contracted. I'm so angry at Janice for doing that I'm lashing out. I'm shaming her, blaming her, complaining her about something that she has done. Okay, it's not about her. What is it I'm saying right now? She never ever listens to what it is I'm saying. Okay, look at the mirrors in the bubble of reality. Look at the mirrors. I am not listening to her. Okay, I'm not listening to me. Right, I'm not listening to me. So what is it right now that needs my compassion? Why can't she just say whatever she wants when I can't? Okay. Why can't you say what it is you want to say? Why is it that you think that you need to be in a certain way to be loved? Can you love yourself right now? Can you be in a body right now that has this idea, this underlying belief? Can you be in a body where this is the case right now? And that is yes or no. Yes, I can. Okay, stay with it, stay with it, stay with it. Just stay with it. Or it's a no, I can't. Okay, can you be with the resistance to that? Yes, I can. Okay, then that is what you're staying with. Remember back in the first Fetter where I talked about that it's like we have this huge house. And when we talk about this, the seeing through the sense of self, it's like entering the front door. And there's lots and lots of rooms in that house. That is all the different aspects of you. And all of that needs to be accepted. It needs to be acknowledged, accepted, and understood. And it's like you are going through the entire house and opening the doors and turning on the light and really looking through what is in there. And without any kind of judgment to what it is you find in those rooms, you just stay with it. It's completely fine. Everything is fine. When we have that huge ego need to selfing, it's because we believe that we are fragile, and you're not. There is no I to be fragile. You know that now. You know that now. So whatever the experience is pointing at, whatever old memory it's pointing at, right now it comes up to the surface, not for you to go back in time and thinking about when you were 7 or 5 and what happened in school or in kindergarten. It's not for you to ruminate about the story, because the story is completely irrelevant. But that story right now is reminding you about something right now that needs your love and compassion right now. That is the only thing you can use the story for, because it is just a story. So right now, when that comes up, the memory about whatever happened in the past comes up, can you stay with it? So you just stay right here. What is reminding about the parts of you right now that it is reminding you about? Can you stay with that? Just stay with that. Just breathe into that. And once you have been with it, you will find that because it no longer needs your attention, 2 things will happen. The first thing is that Janice can be and say and do whatever she wants. Janice is completely free to be who Janice is. It's fine. You have no need for her to be any different. You're actually starting to see that she's perfect to be in the world, because she actually became your master, didn't she? She was your mentor. She was teaching you all these things about yourself. Yay, Janice. Thank you so much. The other thing that will happen is that you will start to forget, because that's the part. So you have this huge house, right? And you enter through the front door when you see through self. There's hundreds and hundreds of rooms in there. Some of them are, there's not even a door into the room. You know there's something behind the wall, but there's not even a door. When you start to acknowledge and accept and understand everything, every single door you open up, you flick the light on, you're staying with everything in there, every room will become less and less relevant. And suddenly rooms will start to appear that you didn't know were there. But when you have been into a room and you've been with every single part of it, that room will vanish, because there is no house. It's just a metaphor. But it's a great metaphor, because you will start to experience that huge house with all the doors, with all the different aspects of you that used to be huge, huge issues. When you have been with every single part of it, it's not relevant anymore. So whenever anger comes up, if you're fine with you being angry, then you don't need to express it. You can just feel it coming up, and you can stay with it and go like, oh, wow, I feel in my body right now something that used to remind me of anger. I know anger doesn't exist, but what I feel in my body right now, it's a very, very deep discomfort. Okay, Can I be in my body where this discomfort is? Yes, I can. And that's it. All the labels we have that we put on it, that it's anger or it's grief or it's resentment or annoyance or irritation or whatever we call it, all that is just labels. And as long as you believe in it, as long as you act as if it's true, as if something external can trigger you into doing something, you're a slave to it. You are super, super identifying. You are selfing about it. So allow it to be there. Not reacting, not yelling at Janice and throwing a chair after her and going like, well, I'm fine now, aren't I? Everything is just fine. Because it isn't. You just identified. So just stay with it whenever it comes up. Know that it can only be an internal job. It's nothing outside of you. It's only inside of you. And just stay with that and stay with that and stay with that. And the magic will happen where the things will start to dissolve themselves. And when they are dissolved, you will forget. It's also why I keep talking about the notebook. I keep talking about writing down, write your notes down about all these things, because you will forget. When I look through some of my notebooks that I have made, there's so many things that I completely forgot. Oh my goodness, yeah, I remember that now. But if you had asked me, I wouldn't have remembered. And some of it is just gone. I can't even recall how it was. It's like, no. And if you ask me, I would have like, no, I never experienced that, because it's just gone. Yeah. So when we are selfing and we're using the blaming, shaming, complaining, and explaining to that, that is what I call indirectly self-referential, because it's indirectly because we truly and utterly in the depth of us can feel it's them that's the problem. When we complain and we blame and we shame, it's always about them. But it's not really, because it's taking, you are judging them to be in a certain way. So it's indirectly self-referential, and it is about selfing. And it just makes me want to show you this. In one of the suttas, the Buddha says that those who thinks he abused me, he beat me, he defeated me, he robbed me, will not still the hatred. Those who do not think he abused me, he beat me, he defeated me, he robbed me, they will still the hatred. And obviously when you read like that, it's like, duh, obvious. But it's pointing to something really, really important. And there are a lot of suttas, there are a lot of texts that are pointing to this part where we talk about the verbal indicators and what we call the verbal indicators. We obviously have it from the Buddhist psychology, and we have it from all the different suttas. And we talked about it, and we're going to make a specific video where we talk about the different lessons that are talking about how you work with the verbal indicators. But that is where we have it from. And it's the part about realizing that whatever you project onto other people and think is true, that is where your suffering is coming from. It's only a projection. They are not doing anything. They're not doing anything. It's your perception of what is happening, your judgment of what is happening, your assumptions of what is happening. That is where your suffering is lying. And that is why it's important to keep turning it back into yourself and look at yourself. But we need to do it with love and compassion and kindness, because it can very easily be turned into that a life without guilt and a life without shame and a life without any kind of, feeling fear or anything like that. That is a great life, but it's not. It's not. That is the recipe for being a sociopath, and that's not what we're going for. That's not what we're going for. So when we talk about fear, anger, guilt, and shame, it's important to remember that there is a healthy component to it. There's the healthy fear, the healthy anger, the healthy guilt, and the healthy shame. And those are equally important when we talk about the verbal indicators. So we're suffering because we act as if there's someone we need to protect. So every time we blame, shame, complain, and find faults outside of ourselves, we need to be very vigilant and very clear that it's nothing outside of me that is the reason for my suffering. I am the reason for my suffering. Me projecting what I don't want about myself onto others, that is where my suffering is lying. And you know now with the bubble of reality that every single thing you think you hear other people saying that you're judging, it's not about them at all. All of that is pointing to an identification that is happening in you. And that is what needs your compassion, love, and kindness. So we will now point you to the verbal indicators. And it's going to be a lot because you know there's nowhere to hide. You are only talking about your perception and your identification of you. So no matter what you hear, have compassion with that fragile part that used to be fragile, that thinks that you're fragile. And then when you breathe and you just stay with the body where you are right now, then you feel into that is only an assumption. It's only a perception. It's not reality at all. So it's also really realizing that when you are putting yourself in a position of victimhood, you are creating a reality where other people are putting you in as a victim, which is not possible. I mean, even if your parents sold you to slavery, you would not be able to stand today and say and talk about how much they did wrong, how much they did not love you, how much they were not there for you to guide you and protect you. Because that might have been, it might be absolutely true, and I'm sending you so much love and compassion if that was the case. Thing is, right now, you're talking about that story because you're still not receiving any kind of love and compassion and protection. You're too busy blaming them. You're too busy complaining about them, where everything in your entire life is pointing to you, that something in you needs your compassion and your love and your kindness and your protection. So instead of spending any more time talking about them, diverting your attention over to them, look at where it's actually pointing, because it's not the story. The story is irrelevant. I'm sorry that it happened. Now it's time for you to get the love and compassion and kindness that you didn't. You can be your parent now. You can be the one that is protecting you. You can be the one that is standing up for you. That is what all that is pointing at. They will never do that. It will never ever happen. What you want them to do will never ever happen. But you can meet yourself with compassion, love, and kindness right now. Just staying with whenever you hear it's coming up, knowing that you're diverting because something very, very uncomfortable is happening in your body. Can you be in a body where it's this uncomfortable? Can you stay with it? No matter what comes up, can you stay with it and just breathe into it? So the verbal indicators are meant as a help and a support to indicate to you that you are selfing right now. Right now, when you are blaming, shaming, complaining, it's like you're standing at a crossroad. One way is the blaming, shaming, complaining, and explaining. The other way is your freedom. You're acting as if your underlying belief is true. You're acting as if the toxic starting point is true. Do you have to? Or can you put yourself, get back into the body and just stay here right now? Feel into that discomfort that you have in the body. And for some people, it's like a pain. For other people, it's a restlessness that they can't stay with. And that's the reason why you're diverting your attention all the time by flicking on Netflix, by scrolling on Facebook or Insta. You know, you're diverting by eating, by going for a run, by whatever you're doing. All those diversions is because it's so uncomfortable to be in the body. Can you be in a body? Can you just stay here? Just breathe briefly, stay here. You have the diversion on one side with the verbal indicators, and you have the freedom on the other side. Just stay here, just stay here, just stay here. So I kind of see the verbal indicators as a lighthouse, you know, when we're completely gone in that, you know, turmoil that we have of blaming, shaming, and complaining. You know, it's like a lighthouse that is like in the storm, that you have that foghorn going off in the back, and you have the light going like, oh, hang on. You're blaming. Okay, you're diverting your attention. Get back to where you need the attention to be, and look into what it is that needs your compassion right now. Another thing I also would like to warn about when we talk about the blaming, shaming, complaining, and explaining is that it very, very easily and quickly sheds a light on that pseudo insight we have had previous in our lives. And I've experienced that a lot as a therapist, that people, they believe they have an insight, like, oh, it's because my mom, she could never show herself love, so she didn't have any boundaries, so I've just copied her. Okay, I get it. So it's like an intellectual understanding of a pattern, but you're just creating a new story. That is not helpful, because you're creating a new story. Your ego is super happy, but you're not resolving anything in the body. It stayed up here, right? You need to get back into your body, where if you have an insight like that, my mom, she never had any boundaries, I have copied that. Okay, how does it feel to be in a body without boundaries? It's got nothing to do with your mom, got nothing to do with her, what she did in her life. It's that story is only pointing at something that needs your love and compassion right now. So how does it feel to be in a body right now where you assume that you have no boundaries, that you don't feel you have the right to say no? How does that feel? And then you stay with that. So you do an inquiry into the inside, and it's the only way to avoid those pseudo insights that we can get, where we assume that we know what it's about. And you will experience this a lot. And it's also why I keep coming with warnings. If you listen to the second Fetter, basically every single lesson in the second Fetter, there's so many warnings where I'm warning about you making this into a new concept or this into a new belief. And it's the same with the verbal indicators. They're only indicating that there's something that needs your compassion. When you can talk about it, you're creating a story. When you can talk about it, you create a label. And then we start to talk about the label instead of staying in the body with what actually needs your love and compassion right now. And it's also why we have created the material for the verbal indicators the way that we have, that it comes with a lot of inquiries, because we want you to really, really own all of it, really take all of it home. So when you hear yourself blaming someone for something, then you take it home. See, what is it that I'm blaming myself for? Okay, can I stay in a body where I'm blaming? Can I fill myself up with love? Okay. Now, is there anyone that can blame anyone ever? On the ultimate level, is that even possible? And then go back and dissolving even that. And that's why we have made all the inquiries for this part of it, so you really, really, really can get to the root of it and dissolve whatever it is that is so painful and difficult to stay with. And it's also what we talked about in the fourth Fetter, that life is so immensely dissatisfactory. Listen to the inquiries that we have in the fourth Fetter for the 3 different levels. Because realizing how much dissatisfaction is in your life and how much you're actually blaming, shaming, complaining all the time. It's pointing at something, and it's pointing into the part that is not content. And the antidote for this Fetter is contentment. It's about feeling into that part with stillness, simplicity, and contentment is present in your life, and getting back to that state where you feel contentment with no matter what happens. So let's say Janice, you say something, complaining arises in you. You become aware of your mirror. Right now you want to complain about Janice. Okay, it's not about Janice, it's about me. Look into the mirror. What is it in me I'm complaining about right now? Okay, that part. How is this about me? How can I meet that with love and compassion right now? And then you stay with that feeling. You do the inquiry that we have given you to really look into it. You can go back to the fourth Fetter as well and use the inquiries that we made for you there as well, to really feel into the part that is feeling fragile right now. Whenever we try to divert from something, it's because being in the body is very, very uncomfortable. So that's always what you're trying to divert from. There's something in your body right now that feels immensely uncomfortable. Breathe into that. Can you just stay with that? when you breathe into it, you will see how it dissolves itself. So it's not why we do it. It's not for it to dissolve. That just happens. It's just a normal consequence of you staying with it, because it's there, because it needs to be met. So when you meet it and when you stay with it, it will automatically dissolve itself. And when it does, then you follow it even further. Then you follow it into, okay, who was it that was identifying with that? Where do I find the person that was identifying with this part of me? Where do I find the separate self that had the right to complain about Janice? Where is that? Is that even a thing? It's not. So what was it actually pointing at? And then you meet that part of you. I don't want you to just, bypass, spiritual bypass, and say there is no I, nobody's complaining about Janice, it's all sorted. Because that just leaves that part of you that was never ever met, still not met. So make sure you take it from the head, from the cerebral understanding into the body, where you actually feel how a blaming feels, where you feel how a complaining and how a shaming actually feels in the body. So if we put it up like, I am autistic, I love the bullet points, I love things in structure. So here we go. The first part is that everything is a reflection of your bubble. So listen to all the clues to what is actually going on. Whatever you think, it's about you. Whatever you think you hear, it's about you. Whatever you say, it's about you. Whatever you dream during the night, even though it's about other people, they are just projections of you. Everything is only ever about you. So the bubble of reality is there to teach you that whatever comes out of your mouth, whatever you perceive, is only a reflection of you. That's the first part. The second part is what we talked about in the second fetter, about the emotional indicators: fear, anger, guilt, and shame. So looking into the toxic starting point, which of those do you believe to be true? And that is where you're starting from. And that leads you to the third point, which is about verbal indicators. The blaming, shaming, complaining, and explaining. Those are connected with the toxic starting point. It's just the way we choose to express ourselves, but it is pointing straight back to fear, anger, guilt, and shame. So whenever we're blaming, shaming, complaining, and explaining, it's pointing straight back to the toxic starting point. Straight back to that. Can you be in a body where this is now again the topic? This is now again what is arising. And the last point, the fourth point, is about the diversions. And that is everything in the third fetter, about all the habits, but it's also what we call verbal hoops. And we're going to talk more about that at a later point. So if we look at the wheel of identification, this is how it looks, right? You're in your bubble. You got your VR glasses on. That is how you think reality looks. That is the VR glasses you have on. So you have the first fetter, and everything in the first fetter is telling you that it's about identification, right? Everything is just a reflection of your bubble. And it's about you learning to listen to all the clues of what is actually going on in your delusion. So if you have the emotional indicators coming up, fear, anger, guilt, and shame, then you go back and work with the second fetter. If you have any type of diversions or any verbal hoops, you go back and working with the third fetter. And if you have any verbal indicators like blaming, shaming, complaining, and explaining, we're back to the toxic starting point. And then you work with the fourth and the fifth fetter, and obviously going back to the foundational fetter. So everything is about identification. All 10 feathers is about identification. And it can also be said like this, like you are standing in your own bubble. You have the emotional indicators, fear, anger, guilt, and shame, that they're coming out of your mouth. And it happens via the verbal indicators with explaining, blaming, shaming, and complaining. And then we have all the verbal hoops that you should, I won't, I feel, I assume, I haven't, I believe, I don't, I can't, all of that. Those are just verbal hoops. There is no such thing. It's a word that we use to deflect from a feeling that we have inside. And that word is pointing back to the verbal indicator that is pointing back to the emotional indicator, and then we're back to the toxic starting point again. That's why I keep saying going back to the foundational fetters and really, really look into what it is that is your underlying motivation for everything. So we only blame, shame, complain, and explain when we believe that there's an I to protect. When you do no longer self and you no longer believe in a separate self, there's no I to protect. So there's no truth to protect, because you know there's no truth at all. There are only perceptions of truth, and there's not a separate self that needs to be protected, which means that you no longer have the need to blame, shame, complain, and explain. So it's also realizing that when we feel fear, anger, guilt, and shame, we have that underlying feeling of separation. We feel disconnected. And we feel disconnected from ourselves, obviously. And that is when you breathe and you come back to the body and you just stay with how does it feel to be in a body? Can I be in a body? And you just stay with the feeling in your body. That is where you connect. So when you have fear, anger, guilt, and shame, the emotional indicators, you heal that sensation of disconnect that happened way, way back, pre-verbal maybe in some cases. And you just stay with that. And that is also why it's easier to work with the verbal indicators at this point, where we have been through the emotional indicators. We have been through them. You know about fear, anger, guilt, and shame. You know how to stay with that. You know how to meet it with love and compassion. So when you hear, blaming, shaming, complaining is coming out of your mouth, you now will hear, when you're starting to work with this, you now will hear, it's fear, anger, guilt, and shame coming out of your mouth. Okay, take it back home again. You can stay within, stay within, stay within. And a thing I just would like to make you very much aware of is that this is meant for you. You can obviously use it with compassion when you hear other people blaming, shaming, complaining, and explaining. You now know that they are talking about their bubble of reality. You know it's not about you. You know they're talking about them. But don't be a jerk and go and say that, oh, you're complaining because you are passive aggressive, angry. There's something you don't want to look at. Look at me. It's not why we're teaching you this. We're teaching you this, that so when you hear somebody complain, you know that there's something in them that they can't be in a body where this is happening. Can you be in a body next to them when they can't? Can you be the compassionate part? The part of them that wasn't met when they were fragile and they were a child and they were very, very exposed. Can you be with them now? So I'm not talking about you starting to complain about Janice because other people in the office are complaining about Janice. But can you be the one that are just staying with it, that say, I don't like that we talk about Janice behind her back. I don't like that. Everybody knows that. Everybody relates to that. And by that, you are staying with it. So even when Janice, she's complaining, can you stay with her? Instead of going oh, I don't want to be with you when you complain, can you just be the kind one? Know that she's complaining because there's an underlying belief that she believes in, and you can be the bigger person. You can stay with that. You don't have to, you don't have to. If you are in any kind of toxic relationships, obviously get out. But when it's just the everyday blaming, shaming, complaining that people are in general doing, see where the hooks lie in you that makes it difficult for you to be with. And use the inquiry that we have for that specific point. If it's blaming, if it's shaming, if it's complaining or explaining, use the inquiries to really look into you and stay with you with the part that needs compassion and love in that situation. And it's that really, the last thing I want to say is that when you hear blaming, shaming, complaining, and explaining come out of your mouth, you know that it's your bubble that is talking right now. You see the mirror. You're only blaming yourself. You're only complaining about yourself. You're only shaming yourself. You're only explaining towards yourself. Can you be with that? Can you be in a body where this is happening right now? Coming back to the original where you just stay with it. You don't need the label of blaming right now. Can you be the one that you are that harsh towards? And just stay with that. So the verbal indicators display that pain, but they also display a tool because they're pointing into what it is in you that needs your love and compassion. So they're supposed to be used as an indication to that felt sense of separation that we feel. So when you hear blaming happening, just know that it's like a lighthouse. It's an indication to you that okay, there was something about that. So it's just a tool for you to look into what it is that needs your attention. It's not a new concept or new truth that you can build a new belief on. It's exactly the opposite. This is helping you to dissolve that underlying truth and those underlying beliefs that you hold. It's helping you to look at it and stay with it in you, and allowing the world to be as it is, and allowing you to be as you are and other people as they are. So what you use the verbal indicators for, it's when you hear blaming, either you blaming someone, or you hear other people blame, or you hear complaining. So you complaining about someone, other people complaining. You hear shaming, you shaming yourself, or you hear other people shaming, or you hear explaining, or you hear other people explaining. What they're calling for is compassion. And that's it. It's the easiest way to say it. It's calling for compassion. Taking it back home into your bubble of reality. What is it right now in me that needs my compassion regarding blaming? What am I blaming myself for? What am I shaming myself for? What am I complaining about myself? What am I trying to divert my attention with and justify with explaining? So use it for that for now, to really detect when you within your bubble are doing any of that. What is it in you right now that is calling your attention for compassion and love and kindness in that area? And remember that when you have a thought about something in the past that happened, the story is just a story. What it is pointing at is right now there's something in you that needs to be healed regarding that. So not regarding what happened, but the feeling that arose when you had that thought. So if you have a thought about something that happened when you were 7, and you feel so shameful about it, it's not about what happened when you were seven that made you feel shameful. It's about the shame that you feel right now that has the same flavor, the same tweaks that the shame had then. That is why we use the past to heal ourselves now. So when you feel shame and it's related to a story, let go of the story, let the story be, and just stay with that type and flavor of shame right now. Can you be in a body where that shame is here? It's a yes or no. Breathe into it in your body. How does it feel? I can feel in my stomach, I can feel in my throat. Okay, breathe into it, breathe into it. Just stay with it, stay with it. And when you stay with it, you will start to feel that it's starting to shift, because nothing stays the same. Everything is changing all the time, even a feeling of shame. As long as you have a label on it, it will feel as if it's the same. The moment you detach the label, you will feel that the body sensation of shame will change. It's not the same. It does change all the time. And I actually think that was it for now. The next one that is coming, it's the lesson about blaming. And there will be an inquiry with it. So we're going to talk specifically about blaming. Until then, I would like for you to keep working with your bubble of reality, to keep working with that uncompromising way to work with your shadow, with that very uncompromising shadow work that it is to look at the bubble. That whatever you say, whatever you think, it's an indication of something in you that needs your love and compassion and kindness. And use it for that. Do not use it for being, extra cruel towards yourself. And oh my God, we're here again. Just come on, breathe. Send lots of love and compassion to yourself in the area that needs it. And then so keep using the mirrors in the bubble to really keep looking at yourself all the time. What is it right now that needs my love? Okay, what is it right now that needs my love and compassion? What is it right now that needs my love and compassion? So no matter what thought you have, you reflect it back and you fill that part up with love and compassion. So it's back into the body, and feel it in your body and fill that part up with love and compassion. And then something new will happen back into the body, fill it up with love and compassion. So you keep healing and healing and healing the things that need your attention. I think that was it. Thank you.